As a result of Hurricane Harvey, there's another danger on top of the insane amounts of flooding. And that's not to downplay the flooding, because the flooding is just unlike anything we've ever seen before. I mean, it really is just a disaster. So many people have had their homes ruined, their lives ruined. People have died. I mean, and there wasn't an evacuation order, which again is just unconscionable. But here's the other danger. Look at this. Harris County, Texas, is home to around 4.5 million people and more than 40% of the nation's petrochemical capacity. And thanks to Hurricane Harvey, which is now a tropical storm, it could get pounded with up to 50 inches of rain by the end of this week. That unprecedented rainfall and the flooding that accompanies it has forced oil and gas companies in the region to shut down critical infrastructure in the face of a potential environmental catastrophe. At least 10 refineries on the Texas coast have shut down, and whenever a refinery has to be closed or restarted, especially in emergency situations, its emissions far exceed what's typically allowed. Upsets or sudden shutdowns can release large plumes of sulfur dioxide or toxic chemicals in just a few hours, exposing downwind communities to peak levels of pollution that are much more likely to trigger asthma attacks and other respiratory systems. I think I'm supposed to say problems. A 2012 study by the Environmental Integrity Project found. Houston area resident Stephanie Thomas told Houston Press something powerful hit her nostrils early Sunday, describing the smell like burnt rubber with a hint of something metallic thrown in. Brian Paris, a nonprofit worker who often visits Manchester, a community that lies near several chemical plants, told the paper he was certain the pollution was affecting him. It was weird because I was getting a heartache and a scratchy throat, like the one I get when I take people on toxic tours of Manchester. But I was sitting at home, Paris said. The stuff was getting sucked into my house through the window air conditioning units. Air Alliance Houston estimates that the area's petrochemical plants will release more than 1 million pounds of air pollution as a result of Harvey. ExxonMobil's, 1 million pounds of air pollution as a result of Harvey. ExxonMobil's Baytown facility, the largest petrochemical complex in the U.S., sustained damage in the storm and has been shut down. Company officials told CNN they're trying to minimize emissions, but according to ExxonMobil's filings with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, those emissions are likely to last until Friday. In April this year, a federal judge ordered ExxonMobil to pay $20 million in fines because of the Baytown complex illegally spewed 8 million pounds of hazardous chemicals over a 5-year period. Environment Texas says Baytown is likely emitting chemicals like 1,3-butadiene, benzene, and ethylene, all of which can pose significant health hazards given large enough exposure. And people stuck breathing toxic fumes can't simply go elsewhere because of the flooding and other dangers posed by Harvey. They're effectively stuck where they are. Air pollution is one of the unseen dangers of the storm, stated Dr. Elena Kraft, a senior health scientist at Environmental Defense Fund. Poor air quality puts the most vulnerable among us, like children and seniors, at risk for asthma, heart attacks, strokes, and other health problems. Wow, man. Holy shit. That's insane. You know, it always, when it comes to nuclear facilities, and when it comes to chemical facilities, what I'm always amazed by is the seeming lack of preparation for catastrophic scenarios. Now, it's actually not true that they don't have, measures in place, but the measures in place are obviously not sufficient. Look what happened in Hiroshima. Look what happened in Chernobyl. Look what happened with, I think it was 5 Mile Island. Wait, did I say Hiroshima? That's not what I meant to say. I meant to say Fukushima. There you go. So that's with nuclear plants. Now with chemical plants, apparently the same thing is happening. They're like, oh, well, when you shut down the critical infrastructure and then fire it back up, you're basically poisoning everybody in sight. Well, then why the fuck did you make it the way that you made it where that's possible? Why wouldn't you have effective regulation in place in order to make sure that even in a worst case scenario, this doesn't happen? Well, you already know the answer to that. Because these companies lobby the government and they basically get their way. Hey, we don't want to do these burdensome regulations because they're expensive and building the infrastructure for them is hard. And in order to do the research and development to figure out how we can refire up these plants without spewing toxic chemicals into the atmosphere at unsustainable levels, it's too hard. It's too hard. It costs too much money. We don't want to do it. And hey, I mean, think about it. Are we really going to have that many terrible situations? Are we really going to have that many Category 4, Category 5 hurricanes, tropical storms, or whatever that could really end up being a catastrophic situation for the people in the area? No. Well, sometimes you get them, especially with climate change. Now they're happening more and more often. The once in 100 year storm or once in every 500 year storms are happening way more often now. So the infrastructure has to catch up to the reality. But we don't have that because we don't have effective regulation because corporations have bought the government. So this is where we are, you know. Oh, what are you going to do? We had to shut down the chemical plants and we refire them up and you poison everybody, but it is what it is. No, not it is what it is. Fucking fix it or else you shouldn't exist. If you don't have the effective regulation to make it safe, then don't talk to me about how you want to set up the place in the first place. It should be totally safe, and you should be planning for the worst of the worst scenarios because given enough time, the worst of the worst scenario happens. It's so crazy that you have climate change happening, clearly, and it's driven, at least in part, by man and the emissions we're putting out there. And the area in Texas that got hit is, of course, the oil capital of the U.S. and apparently the chemical capital, too, or at least a big area for chemicals. And that's what got hit. You know, all the money that goes towards rebuilding after this disaster, it needs to go to the people in Texas. It needs to go to the people who were affected in Texas. Not a dime should go towards the oil companies and the chemical companies because they helped create this problem in the first place, didn't set up effective regulation to begin with, tried to skirt the regulations, made it unsafe. Now people are suffering the consequences, and you bet your ass they're going to try to get in on some of that sweet emergency relief money. The answer to that, in my book, is fuck no.